Hi guys, today's presentation is about how we can leverage the Oracle approval hierarchy generated by Oracle Approval Management in a custom workflow. As we all know, Oracle Approval Management, known as AME, is a centralized engine to generate the approval process, and they generate the approval process based on the different rules and functions and conditions. And the requirement here is how we can use that approval hierarchy in a custom workflow. Actually, the use case here is customer has a custom workflow in for the generation of the approval process, and this workflow has a sub process which will basically uh, get the approval uh, get the approver name. So in the custom process, what customer has did is they have a custom process and a custom UI. From the UI, they basically enter the approval structure in the custom table, and in the workflow they will read the approval detail from the custom table. The issue here is everything is working fine, but recently they are encounter many issues. First of all, if there is a change in approval hierarchy, they have to modify the data in the custom table. If somebody leave the organization or got a promotion, or somebody newly joined the organization, and if he is a part of the approval hierarchy, the IT department has to modify the custom table. Many a time they forget to update the custom table, and because of that the wrong people get the approval notification, and it creates a lot of confusion. Business recently came to the IT department with the requirement that we already have a Oracle approval management implemented in the organization, and it is used by quoting, purchasing, and HR. So why can't we leverage the Oracle approval management to generate the approval hierarchy for this custom solution? Another push point of using this AME was in AME they have already defined the actual human resource hierarchy based on the job level. They define actually I mean to say they have already defined a approval hierarchy based on the human resource job level, and all the rules or conditions to generate the approval was already defined, and it was pretty much implemented. So there was a push from the business to use the Oracle approval management to generate the approval hierarchy for the custom process. That way, the company need not to maintain the approval hierarchy in the two different places. So how we can do this approach was, the idea was keep the workflow as it is, but wherever the workflow is calling the custom table to get the approval, so rather than calling the custom table to get the approval, use the AME APIs to get the approval hierarchy. So that was our approach, and during implementation we found that we need to do a lot of setup for the custom module in the Oracle approval AME, and we have to define the conditions, attributes, transaction types. And once we done everything, it was very easy to call and use the AME API in the custom workflow process to generate the approval. So in today's presentation I will give a little walkthrough about the AME, what we need to do. I will not cover the setups because that is covered in another presentation. So I will talk about little theoretical concepts about AME and how we implemented it in our workflow. So to begin with, what is an AME? AME is a web application providing following services to the calling applications. The calling applications could be, in our case, it was a custom application. Then we have a purchasing, we have a quoting, and the human resource. So it provides the following services to a calling application: a centralized repository for defining and sharing rules, an execution engine to evaluate rules based on the transaction specific data, list management capabilities, history of the approval status. Please note that AME does not manage the notification or routing or responses from the approver. This is basically an engine to generate the approval hierarchy based on the rules, conditions. I will talk more about what are the rules and condition in the next few slides. So, to begin with approval management, in the approval management, in the top level, we have a transaction type, like we say Oracle quoting, purchasing, or custom application transaction type. And each transaction type has some attributes associated with that, or has a components. Like we have a like transaction types have the attributes like quantity, order total, line discount, person ID, um, and like I can say attributes like if the quantity is greater than 100, I want to use the approval list. Approval level should be manager and above. If the quantity is less than 10, it should be the supervisor and the below. If the order total should be greater than 100,000, the approval level should be the vice president. If it is less than 100,000, it should be senior manager and something like that. So these are the attributes are like quantity, order total, line discounts, and the value for this attributes can be static. I can say okay, if a quantity is greater than 10, order total will be greater than 20, or I can generate the value dynamically. Suppose I have I want to do for the say for quoting, and I want I can write a select statement to retrieve the value for these attributes from the quoting header or line sort tables. And then the transaction type have the attributes, then the conditions. Condition is like this: quantity is greater than 100, amount is greater than 1000, the account number should be XYZ, the location should be Northern America or something like that. So we have attribute, we have a condition, and then we have another key component of the transaction type is the action type. The action type defines the rule for generating a list of approval. Our action type is a method by which approvers are added to a approval list. Like action type could be a dual chain of authorities, or it could be based on absolute job level. So we can say our action type should be absolute job level. For example, we need approval from at least level 3. That means anybody who anybody whose job is at least level 3 and above should be part of the this approval process. And then we have something called action. Action is an instruction to AME to how to execute action type. And then we have a rules, which is nothing but a combination of condition plus action. Suppose I want to define a rule. If an attribute like a order total has a condition like order total attribute should be if it is a greater than 100,000, then I need a approval whose job level is at least level 3 or more. So level 3 could be a manager, could be a senior manager, could be a vice president based on your HR setup. In AME, we have a 3 rule priority modes: absolute, relatively, and disable. So this is what I was talking about, a transaction type in AME. So whenever you want to use an AME, you have to go to the AME and define a transaction type. Like for purchase order, there should be like it is, since it's a seeded one, the transaction type is already existing. If you have a custom process, then you have to define your custom process transaction type in AME first. When you define a transaction type, then you have to define components like attributes. So whenever you define a transaction type in AME, it will default mandatory attributes, and then you have to define your attributes. Like suppose like in our case, the approvals were based on the amount. So we define amount is not a mandatory attributes. So once we set up our custom transaction type in AME, we define the attributes like amount, quantity, and account number, person ID. These were the attributes which we defined because we want to use these attributes while defining the conditions. So we define our attributes and then we define the condition like order total should be greater than 100,000, and then we define the action type. Action type is like how the approval should be added to the approval list. In my case it was a job level. So in the rule was if the order total attribute is greater than 100,000, then the action type is a job level of at least 3. And then there is something called group. See, in my case, action type was based on the job level, but many a time we have a requirement where we want to generate a list of approval which are not based on any rule. I just want a running or a random number. So like I just handpicked a few people and I want them to be part of the approval. And since those people are handpicked and cannot be defined by any HR rule or anything else, so I just create a rule and then enter those handpicked people name in that group, and then I can use that group as a part of my rule. So as you can say, we have a transaction type and that has a attribute, condition, action type, groups, and then we create a rule based on that. So in an example of the rule is if the attribute order total is greater than 100,000, then I want a action type of job level 3 or more, or I want a group name XYZ approval to do the approval. Now, before we go to the workflow, how we design the workflow, let me talk a little bit about how the AME architecture. In AME, as you can see, this is how the AME works. The calling application send a request to get a list of approval to AME by means of sending runtime data of transaction to AME API. For example, they send a PO data to AME API. So like if they have PO number, what type of PO is this, then the line details, how much quantity, and also they send the complete PO data to AME API. AME execution engine process the data which we send to the AME API. AME engine evaluate rules for the transaction type. Rules are defined in AME schema for a transaction type. A transaction type may have more than one rule associated with it. AME evaluate each rule depend on the condition and attributes. Rules then execute action type. Whatever I have listed everything in the next slide. So as I said, rules then executed action type. AME then return calling application list of approval sorted based on setup in AME. Please note that when we call AME is Oracle approval engine. So please note that when we call Oracle approval engine, it generates list of approval, identify next approval, check the status history to check if the people has already approved or not. Calling application receive response from AME and then it send the notification to approval. Plus, calling application update the status of the approval in AME by means of a calling an AME API. AME is completed when the approval is complete. Please note that one very important point. If you are implementing AME in your custom process, so whenever an approval may respond to the notification, say approved or rejected, it's our job to tell AME what the action was. So there are API which we have to execute to update the AME about the status of the action taken by the user. So this is what I have listed. This is the complete detail of the AME architecture. If you want, you can refer the user and developer guides for the more details. So this was my workflow. So we have a The initial approval was, so this is a sub process of the complete approval process. So because we implemented AME in this sub process, so I'm going to talk about this only. So we have a start, we have initiated approval, and if it is not eligible, then it's go to end. If the approval is initiated, we send a notification, and then user can approve or reject. If it is a reject, then we stop the workflow. If it approve, then we check whether next approval exists in the hierarchy or not. And before we check, as we said, since the approval is approved and we are about to check if there's another approval in the hierarchy, we have to tell AME what action user has taken. Since in this case it has taken the approval action, we have to tell AME that approval has already approved and we are looking for the next level of approval. And if there is a next level of approval, go and look for the next approval, otherwise complete. So what we are doing is, so to begin with, please make sure that you have required setup in the approval management before you start working on the workflow. I have a detailed presentation, 3-part detailed presentation about what are the setups. So please refer that. Make sure that the AME is integrated with the calling application. I mean, if it is a purchasing, if it is a quoting, it is already registered with the AME. But suppose you have some requirement for the order management. Suppose you want to use Oracle order management, which is one of the standard application of Oracle ERP, and you want to use AME. You have to go to the AME and register that application with the order management, with the AME. And if in our case it was a custom application, so we registered with the AME. So design your workflow process and then call the AME APIs. So what I did is, in the initiate approval process, I called AME underscore API 2 dot get next approval 1 to get the approval. So this API goes to the AME API engine based on the application, based on the transaction type, application, rules, attribute, condition. It will generate the list of the approvals. And then it give me the approval, and then the workflow move further. And in case user approve it, I'm sending a notification, and then I'm calling the get next approval. In the first action I'm taking the get next approval is I'm calling API AME underscore API dot update status to API to tell the AME engine, Oracle approval management engine, that user has already approved it. And then again I'm calling AME underscore API 2 dot get next approval 1 to call to get the next approval. If there is a next approval, I am getting a response yes, like it give me the next approval, and then I tell the workflow the response is yes. It goes to the notification approval. If it says there is no more approval existing, then I'm going to the no. So this is, I explained whatever I said, I have listed this thing. So I have explained how I'm calling this API and what is the purpose of this API. So if you want to know more about the setup, go to my blog hiearchy.blogspot.com, search for this string, and you will get a presentation about how to set up the AME for your custom application. Feel free to send me your comments if you need more details. So feel free to leave the comments either at my blog hiearchy.blogspot.com or send me an email at sgupta@businessinsightsinc.com. I hope this presentation is helpful to you. And in case you are not able to do that, and if you want some help from me to customize your workflow to call AME API to get the approvers, feel free to contact me. I can definitely help you to customize your workflow. That's all for folks. I know this is a very short time to explain in depth about AME and how the workflow. But the purpose was to just to give an overview and tell you, like, initially when the requirement comes to me, I thought it's not possible, and I spent a couple of days on that, but then I found it possible and it's very easy. So purpose of this presentation to provide little awareness, like with this, what is possible, what is not possible. So feel free if you need any additional information. Thank you very much.